This week on Your Hormonal Story, we chat to a beautiful young woman called Chloë and all the things that she had to go through with endometriosis and getting a diagnosis. Now, it's a really heartbreaking story and one that you would never wish on any young woman to go through, but we dig into everything she's had to experience, how she had to push for a diagnosis after being admitted to hospital 4 times before she could get that diagnosis. So it's a really interesting story for anyone that suffers from endometriosis, or you know anyone with endometriosis, or you're just interested in understanding other women's journey when it comes to women's health and hormones. So spend a little bit of time, listen to Chloë's story, and I'm sure you're going to love the story. Hi Chloë, and welcome to Your Hormonal Story.
Hi Jeff, how are you today?
Thank you so much for taking the time to tell us your story, and it's an amazing story. I know a little bit about it, but just for the ladies tuning in now, Chloë is diagnosed with endometriosis and has quite a rich hormonal history that we're going to dig into. So you want to tell us a little bit about the symptoms that you're suffering from at the moment, Chloë?
At the moment, Jeff, really struggling sort of mid-cycle with bloating and flare-ups. I'm still struggling with, but there's definitely been a decrease over the past few years since my diagnosis, and starting to put things in place to manage it.
Okay, and how old are you now, Chloë?
29.
29, okay. And so let's go back to that diagnosis. It's one spot I always like to start. Tell me a little, what age did you get diagnosed with endometriosis?
So I was diagnosed at 27 years old after about 6 years of trying to get some answers of what was going on with my body.
It's incredible, isn't it? I think that there is an average, it's 7 or 8 doctors that women need to see before they can get a diagnosis. And it is a complex diagnosis. Just tell for the ladies that haven't been through that, what are some of the tests and examinations that they did to confirm endometriosis?
So for me, I ended up in hospital multiple times with severe pain. I had blood tests done, I had ultrasounds done, both internal and external. I had hormonal tests done. Obviously, you know, none of that shows endometriosis, and it was I ended up in hospital and they did an exploratory surgery, which is when they found the endometriosis. And then, yeah, it was not fun.
Did you have any inkling before that this may be an issue?
I did. So I first heard about endometriosis when I was already living in Australia. So I would have been about 22 or 23 years old. And a friend of mine started to talk to me about it and say, you know, some of the things that you're talking to me about sound really similar to what I've experienced and what I've been through. And I went to about 4 doctors, kind of presenting them with this and saying to them, this is what I'm experiencing, this is what I've been told. And multiple occasions I was told, no, you know, don't Google everything that you hear, and it's not necessarily your case, and just felt really unheard. And it wasn't until I actually went to a family planning clinic in Australia just for a routine pap smear that the nurses and the doctors started to actually listen to me and take me on the journey to get a diagnosis and to treat the pain.
Yeah, and it's incredible. And thankfully now there's a lot more awareness coming around endometriosis, and there's a lot more funding being put into it, which is fabulous. But there's still a lot of GPs out there, and it's kind of this public perception, medical perception, that it's normal to have pain when you have your period. So that just puts anything into a big bracket that this is normal. But we say, yeah, it's very common, but it doesn't mean that this is the normal state of the human body. So yeah, it's such a shame that it takes so long. Take me right back to when you first got your period, and we'll try and explore a little bit about that and your journey from there.
Yeah, so I started my period when I was really young. I was 11 or 12 years old. And even though I was surrounded by most of my friends were older than me, none of them had started their periods yet. So I didn't really have anywhere to go to sort of compare notes, and felt quite ashamed and embarrassed that this had happened to me. When you're that young, I hadn't had a conversation with my mum yet. I hadn't had a conversation with my sister yet. But I remember being in absolute agony, and I was at school when it started, and just being really confused as to what's going on with my body. I then, throughout high school, my periods got increasingly worse in terms of pain. I got really bad lower back pain, abdomen pain, really bad lethargy. And there was days where when I would be either mid-cycle or on my period, I would be in so much pain I couldn't get off the couch or, move from my bed, and people had to carry me either to get me in the car to go to the doctor or carry me from the couch to the bed. And it almost felt like nothing worked. I remember taking every painkiller under the sun, and nothing seemed to help. And I then, when I got a bit older, so at 17 or 18 years old, started having a conversation about going onto oral contraception and trying the pill to help manage the heavy periods and the pain. And that absolutely made a difference. But while it was helping with the pain, the side effects were quite scary for me. I remember the one day sitting with my previous partner, and we had a wonderful conversation and everything was great, and he went out, and about 2 hours later I just completely switched into this different person and got really angry, and I felt that starting to happen more and more. The mood swings were quite confronting and quite scary to experience, and then when you snap out of it, I was like, whoa, what just happened? And after about, goodness, it would have been 5 or 6 years on that pill, I went back to my doctor and I just said, the weight gain is, I can't stand it anymore. I need to be on something else. There's got to be something else that we can do. So I was then put onto a lower dose of the pill, and that definitely helped as well. The mood swings weren't as severe, but they were definitely still present. And the weight gain also did subside a little bit. I was on that pill for a year or two, and I then moved across to Australia. And when I got here, I made the decision that I wanted to just let my body tell me what it needed, and I wanted to actually know what was going on for me. And so I went off the pill completely and started just to see if I had a regular cycle and what the pain was like, if it was manageable. And after about a year of being off the pill, ended up in hospital in the emergency department 3 times with severe pain. And because it wasn't anything that doctors could see in blood tests or imaging, after about 4 days on average of being in hospital each of those times, I was just sent home with no answers, which is really heartbreaking, because when you're in that much pain, you almost feel like you're going crazy and that you're not being heard, and you're trying to tell someone that, no, there's definitely something wrong with me, like there's got to be something. Yeah. And to be told just to go home and go on some really heavy pain medication that, I remember taking one of my pain medications the one day, and I felt so out of control because it was so strong. It's no way to live. Like, I couldn't go to work. I couldn't function. I would cancel plans with my friends. And people just, I think for people that haven't been on the journey or haven't heard about endometriosis, don't realise the impact that it can have, and start to almost, they don't believe you, and they kind of go, it can't be that bad, like the doctor said nothing was wrong. So yeah, after my 3rd time in hospital, I revisited and had that conversation with my friend where she had mentioned her diagnosis and her story and what she'd been through. And I started talking to more people about it. And the more people that I spoke to, the more I heard this word endometriosis being spoken about, and people that had been diagnosed and their stories were quite similar to mine. So I went to visit, like I said earlier, the family planning clinic where where a friend of mine had been. It was originally just for a routine pap smear. And I started having that conversation with the nurse and the doctor there. And I remember sitting in the chair, and I actually started crying when she listened to all my symptoms and my story. And you know, for me, my symptoms, it was the bloating, it was the painful periods, it was the backaches. I also had painful intercourse, bleeding after intercourse, spotting in between periods. And it wasn't until she said to me, that absolutely sounds like endometriosis, and I think that we should investigate further. And when you hear those words and someone finally takes you seriously, it's such a relief, because you've actually got someone that's on your side and wants to help you. So we put a plan in place. We booked in for me to get a Mirena, which I was advised that was one of the pain management strategies. And 2 weeks later, I was back there, got the Mirena in, and I'm really lucky that for me, it was a really wonderful experience, as wonderful as it can be. I had no pain throughout the procedure. I was terrified because I'd heard so many horror stories, but I was really lucky that for me it worked, and my body seemed to agree with it. And for about 2 or 3 months, I had no symptoms, but unfortunately after a couple of months my symptoms sort of started to reappear again. I still had my normal period when I was on my Mirena at that time, and I guess I just got really curious because I wanted to know what else I could do to fix what was going on inside. So I spoke to a couple more people, continued the conversation with friends, and was lucky enough to come across a friend of mine who has been seeing a really good specialist here in Sydney, and she suggested that I just book an appointment with her and see how I go. I booked the appointment, and it took me 3.5 months to get in, which is, again, really, you know, you're really excited because you finally got some more answers and a plan in place. But that wait of 3.5 months, and every month going through your cycle, and the pain, and the, you know, sitting in the shower crying because you actually just don't know what else to do. But eventually I managed to see my specialist and was booked in for diagnostic surgery, because the pain was just unbearable. Then COVID hit, and it was about 6 days before my surgery, I got the phone call to say that all elective surgeries had been cancelled. And I can't even explain that feeling of, you know, you're so excited because you're finally going to get some answers, and if there was endometriosis, the specialist was going to do excision surgery, so you kind of gearing yourself up to have all these answers and to have a bit of a better understanding of what's going on with your body, and then you just get shut down again. So that was meant to be the Easter weekend in 2020. And in May 2020, I woke up really early morning the one day to start getting ready for work. And I had such a bad flare up that I kept fainting every time I stood up. I couldn't make my way from the bedroom to the bathroom without fainting or blacking out from the pain. So I called my boss and I kind of went, I'm going to be a bit late for work today. I just need a bit of a sleep in. I'm not sure what's going on. And just feeling a bit out of it. And when I told my boss what was going on, she told me to hang up and call an ambulance. And, you know, as women do, you brush it off and you're like, oh, it's not that serious. Like, I can deal with it. It's fine. And I didn't call an ambulance. I'd lived alone at the time. And I then called my boss back and I said, I actually think I'm going to need to take the day off. I'm really not well. I feel really nauseous. I'm in excruciating pain. I need a rest today. My boss then told me again, hang up and call an ambulance. And again, I didn't listen. So I called my doctor and I told my doctor what was going on. My doctor told me to hang up and call an ambulance. I ignored my doctor. And then I called, we've got I can't quite remember what it's called, but there's like a helpline, a health helpline in Australia that you can call and they advise you what you should do. And I was speaking to the nurse on the other end of the phone and she said to me, sweetheart, you need to call an ambulance immediately. And I went, oh, okay, yeah, sure. So eventually called the ambulance, and even on the phone to 000, I said to them, look, I don't know if I'm over exaggerating, but I'm just in a lot of pain and I keep fainting. And within 3 minutes of calling the ambulance, I could hear the sirens and they had arrived. So they picked me up and took me through to the nearest hospital. And again, because there was nothing showing up on imaging, my appendix looked fine, and my blood work was all fine. I spent 2 days in hospital going backwards and forwards with surgeons, still in pain, and being told, you know, we can operate if you want us to, but we don't, you know, we wouldn't advise it because it's not, if you don't really need surgery, we don't advise surgery. And the surgeons then switched over and a new surgeon came in and he listened to my whole story. I told him, like I had told the previous surgeons, that I was booked in for a diagnostic surgery the month prior, and he booked me straight in. And within 2 hours of talking to that surgeon, I was in theatre getting operated on. So in that surgery, they did find the endometriosis. So that's where I was originally diagnosed, but didn't do anything about it. So I was then referred on to my specialist, who couldn't do anything to help because excision surgery was still considered elective. When you're in that much pain, it's not elective. It is something that you need help with straight away, because it's no way to live your life when you're, you know, having to be driven home from work, or when you can't go to work because the pain medication that you need to take is so strong that you're not allowed to drive a car or anything like that. So it felt, as excited as I was to have the diagnosis, to know that there was nothing that I could do about it until COVID subsided was almost more challenging. As much as I knew that I could manage it through what I ate and through exercise, you know, through different exercises and being really conscious and listening to my body, it was still really frustrating not to be able to know, you know, what extent is this actually to, what stage is it, is there anything else going on? But they did finally lift all the restrictions, and in October 2020, I was booked in for excision surgery with my specialist. During my excision surgery, they found the endometriosis on my bladder and my bowels, and all the way up the right-hand side of my body. And they also found that I had adenomyosis as well, which was obviously an explanation for a lot of the symptoms that I was having too. But unfortunately, to my understanding, it's what I've been told by my specialist, you can't remove it without a hysterectomy. So again, really excited, but having to put in things in place to manage that was really challenging again, because I didn't want to be on Mirena anymore. I really wanted to let my body do its thing and tell me what it needed, but without the Mirena, the pain was so unbearable that you have to make the decision, like, do I want to be able to live somewhat of a normal life, or do I want to, be in pain all the time? So I chose to have a new Mirena inserted to help with the pain of the adenomyosis. And it's now been 18 months since my surgery. And over the past 18 months, it's been a lot more manageable. But unfortunately, with the adenomyosis, I do still have some of the symptoms that I really struggle with. And I have, over the past 4 or 5 months, seen some of the symptoms that I had with the endometriosis start to return again as well.
There's lots of things I'd love to touch on there, and let me try and break it down. The first one is just with the pill, and this is for women starting to go into this journey as well, is that you're in this catch-22 situation, whereas the pill and even the Mirena is they can manage some of the symptoms, but you're getting the side effects that come along with that. So that's a really hard thing to weigh up in terms of, what's happening. And endometriosis is not just a hormonal condition. There's elements of inflammatory processes, and there's the immune system involved. But one of the things in terms of endometriosis is you fundamentally don't metabolize your hormones very well. So in a lot of women, so that's sort of what happened. You're getting this sort of you're not breaking down and excreting your hormones well, which particularly estrogen, which causes some of the tissue overgrowth, and then you've got the immune factors. So the pill, although it manages some of the symptoms, can actually potentially fuel the condition at the same time. So it's a really difficult thing. And then the second part of that is it's just incredible what you have to go through in this day and age to get someone to listen to you, and to actually have to go to hospital 4 times, I think, if I'm counting it up, before anyone really takes you seriously. And the symptoms that you're describing, for me as a practitioner, the first thing would be, we need to invest endometriosis. And endometriosis is not an uncommon thing. You got 1 in 5 women potentially these days, depending on that level of diagnosis, that are suffering from different degrees of endometriosis. So it's not like it's a very rare condition. So and often a lot of doctors, in this day and age, often over diagnose with blood tests. But when it falls out of that normal block of what they're used to, and you have to go into this incision surgery, then obviously it becomes a lot more complex. And then, then just you're sort of touching on the hopelessness you've mentioned a couple of times, not being heard, the emotional, you're a young woman, trying to deal with all this stuff on your own, and to keep being told that, to go through that much pain and then come out and say, well, we don't know what it is, must be just incredibly frustrating, emotional. Was from there, were you experiencing any forms of depression or any other emotional issues going on?
Yeah, like I said, you start to really doubt yourself. And for me, I started to almost convince myself that I was crazy and over dramatic and a hypochondriac. And I remember even speaking to some of my closest friends, and even my parents to some extent, where I would explain what I was going through, and they would kind of just say to me, oh, you're really turning it on, or surely it's not that bad. And it starts to impact your relationships. It starts to impact, how you view yourself, because you feel like you're insane. There's apparently no medical reason why you should be feeling like this. And absolutely, especially when you're alone, like living on the other side of the world with no family and a very small group of friends, is really hard to go through all of that by yourself, and to not have someone stand by you and advocate for you is, it has huge impacts, absolutely huge impacts. And that's why when you have someone that listens to you, and you have that, someone that wants to take you on this journey and that wants to help you, it almost feels like there's finally a light at the end of the tunnel.
It's just, I just can't, every story that I go through, I just can't believe what you have to go through. And it's not just you, there's so many women going through this, but there's this element of this silent, because you can't see it, because you can't diagnose this, as you said, it's not there, but the impact on your life is so significant. As you said, you're counseling things to do with your friends, you can't go to work, it's affecting your relationships. And then you throw on top of that any sort of hormonal shifts and changes as well, which make you emotional, can make you depressed, can give you anxiety. It's just for anyone, my heart goes out to them. But just being a young woman, just getting started in life and your career, to have to deal with this, it's huge. And this is one reason why we're chatting about it now, is just so that people can understand. And it's in essence, and I don't want to use this word, it's a form of disability that we have to be talking about and making allowances for. And the third thing I want to get to there is, you've gone through all this and you still, apart from excision surgery, you're still looking at not a lot of treatment options, effective treatment options. And that's why research is so important. And it's why the elements that we try and do as well, you touched on diet and lifestyle, and they're never going to cure endometriosis, but they can go a long way to helping women manage it in combination. And this is where this integrated approach really needs to be popularized as well, so that, one, we get a diagnosis early. Ideally you should have had a diagnosis at 13, 14 at the latest, and then managing that because obviously painkillers have side effects, hormones have side effects. How do we work in an integrated way so that you're not having to carry this burden? You're 29 now and you're only just finding some resolution. So that's 18 years of living and dealing with this.
With my whole journey, I've only now, in the past 4 months, had practitioners start to recommend serious lifestyle changes in terms of seeing a dietitian, considering hormones, and taking different supplements, seeing physiotherapists who specialize in women's health. So it's taken, even with the diagnosis, until late last year for someone to turn around and say to me, well, have you considered going to physiotherapy? And I kind of went, no, like, what would that do for me? And you have no idea. And if no one's ever spoken to you about it or explained to you the benefits of it, I actually had my first session yesterday with my physiotherapist, and the first thing she said to me, looking at me, was she could see my rib and my waist was really small, which apparently is a really classic tell for women with endometriosis, because you're constantly in that sort of pain, sucking in and clenching and pulling everything together, just because you're in so much pain and you're so tense. And over the past 24 hours, I've really been focusing on breathing out and just trying to open up my rib cage a little bit more. And already, yesterday I had pretty bad pain, and today it's slightly better. So, even just being recommended to go see someone different and talk to someone different that you would never think of, makes all the difference.
Yeah. And there's, for some of the ladies listening, this already. What I find really interesting is that your sister has a whole rich hormonal history as well, but in a completely different condition, which is Polycystic Ovarian syndrome. So it's interesting, the two of you have gone on your own paths, but with different conditions. So there's that familial and genetic predisposition that is becoming more and more common in younger women these days, and we're still uncertain why, but it's certainly becoming more and more prevalent, both PCOS and endometriosis. Now, Now you're just getting into this journey, and maybe just during this chat, I can give you a little bit of suggestions and advice too, and for ladies, young women going through this as well, because there's a lot that complementary medicines can do to assist in, and you've just started on some of our products. We'll talk about that later, but it's good to understand what's potentially happening in your body. And I mentioned that there's autoimmune, and there's new research coming around your immune system and its involvement, but there's obviously very much a hormonal aspect to endometriosis as well. And I mentioned, a big thing that I find in endometriosis sufferers is that poor clearance of hormones. So when you reabsorb your hormones, you're getting a 2 and 3 times effect of those hormones if you're not breaking them down through your liver and excreting them. And so that's where the dietary and lifestyle aspects are really, really important, and working on your digestive health as well. So it's really, really important that you're eating lots of soluble fiber and plant-based fibers, because the more fiber you get, what happens is you feed those beneficial bacteria in your digestive system. So obviously fruits and vegetables, kiwi fruit actually is a really good one to build up those natural beneficial bacteria, and they feed on kiwi fruit. And there's research showing that in as little as 5 days, it can really start to boost those levels of beneficial bacteria. Now, those beneficial bacteria, there's certain species that help break down estrogen. And so it's really important that your bowels are working regularly and you have a really nice balance of that correct flora. So one thing we suggest is coconut water kefir. So it's quite easy to make. It's a little bit harder to make in the cooler areas, but you just take some coconut water and you put a probiotic with that and keep it warm, and it ferments. So then if you're drinking that every day, you're putting all the good microbes in there. So that's one way. Fermented foods, so kimchi, sauerkraut, you can ferment vegetables, are really, really important. And there's research that shows that having fermented foods is much, much better than having probiotics. So that just helps, because you're getting the pre and probiotic in one. So the fiber that's in there, those probiotics, which is the bacteria, feed on the prebiotics, which is the fiber. So the combination of the two helps to rebuild all those beneficial bacteria. And then those bacteria break down and allow you to excrete those excessive hormones. So that's really, really important. So digestive health. And then the second layer to that is improving your liver function. So to do that, avoiding alcohol is almost essential in endometriosis. Sugar as well. We see a lot of women with fatty livers that don't drink, and it's just from having too much sugar and binging on sugar, sitting down having a tub of Sara Lee ice cream. You're better off drinking a bottle of whiskey almost, because sugar is that damaging to the liver. So a lot of young women, a lot of men, they're having way too much refined sugars in their diet. So we tend to think about, sugar might make me fat, but it's the damage it does to your liver if you're having it regularly, and obviously soft drinks and sweet drinks and that kind of stuff. So really staying away from sugar as much as possible is really important, and that helps to preserve your liver function. But you can also stimulate your liver function as well. So anything that's bitter helps your liver function. So lemon juice, apple cider vinegar before meals, that can stimulate your liver. And there's a whole range of different herbal medicines that are really good for the liver, and amino acids. So we've got a product called Happy Liver, but there's things like milk thistle, dandelion, globe artichoke, there's amino acids, methionine, taurine, glutathione. There's a whole lot of things that support your liver function. So if, as a prescription for anyone with endometriosis, certainly making sure you're eating the right foods, and you might need some additional fiber to keep those bowels working properly, and then supporting the liver. They're the two kind of building blocks that I suggest from a complementary aspect. You put that together with the medical stuff, you're going to get much, much better results. And then more of a plant-based diet, obviously drinking lots of fluids, staying away from alcohol, sugar. You will, it's not instant, but you will notice in a matter of sort of 3 months, then the longer that you do that, your symptoms will subside. And then it becomes endometriosis situation of managing it, because even with a hysterectomy, it doesn't cure endometriosis. So it's really a situation of managing that, and you learning those tools to put into your toolbox of how to manage. It's like all women with their hormonal conditions. It's just that you've got a really serious situation that you need to manage.
I think when I had my one of my first consults with the dietitian, And she kind of started speaking to me about, you know, cut out alcohol, cut out coffee. And immediately I just went, oh, no, if I've got to cut out coffee, I don't want to hear about it. But then doing a bit more work and looking into it more and actually trying it out and seeing the impact that it had. Coffee's great. I love coffee, but it's not worth the impact that it has on your body.
Yeah, exactly. I love coffee as well, but coffee doesn't love me because I metabolize it too quickly. So, and it does, it certainly can put a stress on the liver. There's a lot of beneficial things with coffee, but there's also for some people with certain conditions, it's just not right. And funny enough, it's not great for women with hot flushes as well, which is at the other end of the hormonal scale. So certainly that. And what we can send you some dietary guidelines as well, just to help you. And dietitians are great, but again, you kind of need that sort of holistic aspect. And one thing we offer as well is we have women's hormonal specialists that it'd be great for you to have a consultation with one of them, just to allow you to start to work very much in that integrated way. And there's other natural medicines as well to help to regulate your hormones and also to manage the inflammation levels. So certain oils, evening primrose oil, fish oils can help to downregulate that inflammatory process, and they can also work on that autoimmune kind of aspect as well. And that coming back to that digestive health as well is if you've got a situation called leaky gut where you're absorbing proteins into your system too easily, that can cause an immune reactivity that can be a possible fueler of endometriosis too. That it's very early, this research, but it's one of the postulations at the moment. So diet is very closely related to immune function and the digestion. Now your body's all one being, but so you've kind of got this genetic predisposition, and then if you don't metabolize hormones well, then your digestive function's not right, and then you put the wrong foods on top, it becomes kind of this perfect situation for all these things to occur. So tell me, you've been taking a couple of the products only for about a month or so. Tell me your experience with that.
I think for me, and like I mentioned earlier to you, I didn't realize what an impact they were having until I went a block of days without taking them. So I've got the happy hormones, happy liver, happy greens and turmeric, and I found kind of when I went for those 4 or 5 days where I didn't take them, I was starting to really feel lethargic again. I was starting to see the bloat. I was starting to feel uncomfortable in my body. I wasn't digesting foods as well, and then when I started back on them 3 days ago, the impact was just crazy. I felt almost like a different person, and I felt like my food was digesting better. I felt my body just felt more comfortable, and I think it's a really nice, I love routine, so I love to have something to do every morning when I wake up. So I used to wake up, my centre where I work is just closed, so I used to wake up at 4:30 every morning and jump up to the fridge. I'd have my little 5 mils of my happy greens and my happy turmeric, and it was just a really nice way to sort of start the day. And the tanginess of it, I found, it might sound really silly, but the tanginess of it really kind of woke me up and just felt like it was waking everything inside me up. And then I noticed that, with having, my breakfast in the mornings, I used to really struggle eating regularly. Whereas when I'm on, and it was purely because of the impact that food would have on me, I would get uncomfortable, bloated, I didn't digest well. And there's a huge improvement since I've started taking the products. And
I'd just like to caveat that as well, is none of our products treat endometriosis, and we don't claim that they treat endometriosis, but it's this holistic kind of approach. And as I said, really, if you can improve your digestive function, and both happy greens and happy turmeric are loaded with probiotics. So that's what you're starting to digest your food properly, you're starting to clear your hormones properly. So it's this kind of really holistic approach, and these are just supportive tools, if you will, because just to improve your overall health. And if we can improve your overall health, your body is going to manage this underlying sort of genetic predisposition with the endometriosis. So they're just support tools. And again, this integrated holistic approach, complementary approach with the best of the medical side of things and holistic things is by far the best approach for any woman with endometriosis. So,
yeah, that's been wonderful. Thank you so much.
It's listening to your stories, if we can help in the smallest way, we're really happy. And if we can help younger women not go through, because the thing with endometriosis is as that endometrial tissue grows, it gets worse and worse, right? So if you can slow that and manage that growth in endometrial tissue as much as possible, well, then that's a great outcome in the long term. So
when I went to my specialist at the end of last year with the pain sort of starting to rear its head again, one of the things that she said to me was, we absolutely can go back in again and do another excision surgery and cut out whatever's there, but the more they cut, the more likely the tissue is to attach and grow even more. Which is why she started suggesting this more holistic approach and seeing the physiotherapist, taking supplements, considering diet, and all of that. So that was also that was something that I had no idea about prior to that conversation with my specialist.
And it's actually the scar tissue that becomes the bigger factor, because scar tissue, it's a hardening of tissue. So that's what causes a lot of the pain then into your 40s and 50s, and for the rest of your life you retain that scar tissue. So yes, the less you have to have excision surgery, the better. And then obviously the more we can slow that growth of the endometrial tissue through diet and lifestyle, the better. A couple of other things that are really worth investigating too is Chinese medicine, and what that can do is just down regulate inflammatory responses and can be a really good tool. And even osteopathy, similar to physiotherapy, but osteopaths have a whole different set of tools that they can, there's a whole branch of osteopathy called visceral organ manipulation. So they actually manipulate the organs slightly so that the organs don't stick together. So that could be a really beneficial thing for you as well. So and all the women I talk to, particularly in this series, but over the last 25 years, it's this journey that you go on. And same with your sister's been on this incredible journey of self-discovery, and she's discovered yoga and very much diet and lifestyle, and it's the level that your sister went into it is a level that a lot of people don't want to go into, because this is, if you're really right into your yoga every day, and then you can really go down a rabbit hole, but that doesn't suit everyone as well, because it's quite a strict way of living. So you've got to find that balance of where you can manage those symptoms through the right balance of diet and lifestyle for you, so you can still enjoy your life at the same time. It's been fabulous and heartbreaking at the same time listening to your story, and I hope that we can, if there's it's this group of teenage women that I really want to put this information out there so they can see what's going on, because you imagine if you were diagnosed at 14, how different your journey would have been. And thank you so much for telling that story and hopefully empowering women of all ages and because there's a lot of women out there that haven't had that diagnosis yet as well. So they really need to push their medical practitioners and get the right referrals so that they can get the right diagnosis as a starting point. And then, my advice is really look at it from a managing the condition and trying to use all these different tools medically and holistically to get the best outcome so you can live a really healthy and productive life.
Absolutely. Thank you so much for listening, Jeff. It's been really, really wonderful talking to you and sharing my story.
Pleasure. And we'll keep working with you on your health journey, and hopefully we'll get the best outcome in years.
Amazing. I can't wait. I'm really looking forward to it.
Thanks, Chloe.
Thank you, Jeff. Bye.